Welcome to the Red Flag Campaign, Mission 3 for the F-16 Viper, and thank you for joining me here on the Cerulean Skies channel. As noted in the first video on the F-16 Red Flag Campaign, these videos are not to teach the discrete skills of operating the F-16. I'm going to presume you already know the basics, and if you need specifics, there are many excellent teaching videos out there. Rather, these videos are about putting all those disparate skills together so that you can actually fly the F-16. I remember back long ago when I first started doing DCS, and I had gotten my first virtual aircraft. It was either the F-15 or maybe the A-10A. I don't know, it's been a long time, but I spent a lot of time hopping around YouTube looking at instructional videos and then got behind the aircraft and thought, all right, let's go, and realized I didn't really know what to do. I mean, I had a rough idea of what buttons did what, but how to put it all together, that was something else entirely. And then years later when I moved on to the FA-18, which was my first serious study module, that I got a long time back, not long after it first came out, then it was even more challenging. I remember launching off an aircraft carrier and going into a dogfight, thinking I roughly had things in hand, and then finding myself repeatedly as if magically blown out of the sky. Because I didn't know how to read things like my RWR and make sense of the tactical reports given by AWACS. Basically, I didn't know how to bring all the disparate skills together required to fly the FA-18 fluidly and with competence. So here we're studying the F-16 Viper, which is beautifully modeled by DCS, still not quite fully developed, but well along the way. And we're going to look at putting those skills together. By the way, I got the F-16 way back in its early release days as well, and I tend to do some things the old way, just out of habit. If you see me doing anything an old way and you know a better way, feel free to comment on it. I'm always happy to learn. I don't pretend to know everything. I'm not a professional pilot. I'm sharing what I know and happy to learn from you as well. So I've already gone through all the steps of starting up the F-16. It's a bit faster and more fluid than the FA-18, and so I find it quite simple. I've set up my favorite chaff and flare program using program 1 set to manual to dump 4 flares at 0.020 seconds apart with no follow-up group, and 4 chaff at 1 second apart, also with no follow-up group. I find this to be a very effective combination for chaff and flares. Sometimes I dump them 3 and 3, with flares going out very fast and chaff at about a second apart. But as this is a relatively fast training mission, and the threats are fairly localized and will mostly be eliminated by the time our strike package gets in there, I'll just play it safer and use a slightly larger amount of chaff and flares for each chaff and flare dump I may have to make. And even though we're still on the ground, we're going to go ahead and get as much of the air-to-ground weapons set up as possible. After all, we have almost 4 minutes till we even have to start heading toward the runway, and we might as well make good use of that time. An aircraft, even a small fighter jet, is a busy place, and once you're moving, things happen fast. So it's best to get all the setup out of the way early on, and then later on, whenever you have a spare moment, as I've mentioned before, just go back and double check. And if you have another spare moment, double check everything again. And if the next time you get a spare moment after that, double check everything again. Frankly, you can never double check enough. When you actually get into the thick of it, that's not the time you want to discover there's any buttons you forgot to punch or switches that you forgot to switch, and discover then that a weapon or defense system that you need desperately at the moment is inoperative because of that. Today, in this mission, our heroic flight Colt 11 will be delivering a pair of laser-guided bombs GBU-10s to a Redland AFHQ. Actually, one GBU-10 should be more than enough firepower, so we will not be dumping them in pairs. I'm going to drop one, assess the damage, and only if necessary, if I miss perhaps, drop the other. And if there's any other dirty work to be done, or air-to-air threats to be eliminated, I'll be capitalizing on my wingmen to take care of that for me, because as the flight leader, at least according to the way DCS works, if I don't complete my mission, which is to say, get back alive, it's a mission failure. So the wingman's first job is to handle any air-to-air threats, and they're also carrying extra GBUs as additional backup. If I don't need that backup, I'll cut them loose on other ground targets before sending them back to base. Alright, I see the B-1B bomber cruising up the taxiway. When that bird passes by, that's our signal that it's almost time to go. So if there are yet any I's you need to dot or T's you need to cross, now is the time. But really, it doesn't take all that long to start up the F-16 and get her ready to go. Honestly, you should have been twiddling your thumbs for about 4 minutes by the time the B-1B comes by. As I said in my last F-16 red flag video when we came across the B-1B in the air, That really is a cool looking aircraft. It's a product of the Cold War from back in the 80s. But when you look at that thing, it really looks like something out of the year 3000, doesn't it? Something you might see in Star Citizen. Alright, let's get to taxiing. Normally you would request to taxi first from ATC, but ATC is currently bugged and they will not give you permission. So just go ahead and get going. Remember, the F-16 has a narrow undercarriage, making it a tippy bird, so take your turn slow and gentle. That's especially important to note if you're used to turning something like the A-10C or the F-A-18, both of which have wide undercarriages. If you time this out right, you should get to the runway with about a minute to spare. And normally you would ask ATC for permission to take off, but again, don't bother, at least not right now, because this happened.
Unable to clear for takeoff. Unable to clear for takeoff.
I'm starting to think the air traffic controller is a traitor and a spy, because you can sit on the ground forever and he will not clear you, and that's a pretty sure way to guarantee a mission failure. Anyway, just go ahead and get in the air. The other bug where the wingmen don't take off right away either is still active in this mission, so you'll need to do a Marshall orbit once or twice. Exiting the runway, I use the racetrack as my landmark, and follow the flight plan and orbit counterclockwise. Climb to somewhere between 4 and 5 angels, and bank around using downtown Las Vegas as your next landmark. Head toward downtown Las Vegas, and then do a 180 back toward Nellis, and along the way, order your wingmen to go ahead and join up. This seems to trigger them to go ahead and take off and join formation, despite the bug. I've also noticed since the big patch last Thursday, when we finally got the Apache, the graphics aren't quite as smooth as they used to be. I hope they get that figured out. They used to be smooth as silk on my system. I've changed a few settings which have improved the situation, but I don't think they're processing as efficiently. Join up. As usual, halfway into my second orbit, the wingmen began to take off. Once they get moving, go ahead and come around and aim toward your steer point, and try to keep your speed to between 350 and 400 knots till they join up. I like to turn off the lights when going into a combat situation, and that's useful in PvP, but I don't think it makes any difference when you're doing a completely AI mission like the Red Flag campaign. Still, I do it for good form.
All players, Dark Star, pre-push briefing. Full up war, visibility good, clear skies. Picture available on request. Lowdown, West SA2 active. East HQ7 active. East SA15 active.
This means the mission is good to go, and all threats are also active. As our various seed and strike packages take out enemy targets and defenses, we'll get updates along the way. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the Nevada map really is beautiful. One of my favorite maps. Alright, strike push package is between 0440 and 0445. So we've gotten here with several minutes to spare, and we will begin a clockwise orbit. At steer point 5, we want to stay far away from the enemy's air-to-air defenses, meaning that if they do decide to send fighters out this way, they'll have to travel as far as possible to get to us. Other fighters have been sent in to deal with the air-to-air dangers. And though the F-16 is an extremely capable air-to-air fighter, we don't really want to get caught up in that. Our job, and therefore our focus, and the only way to succeed at the mission, is to take out our designated ground target.
211, pushing from waypoint 8 at 30,000.
Those radio broadcasts inform us that other flights are pushing. And as this is the Red Flag School, a training campaign, I think it's fair to look at the tactical map to see what's going on. Almost dead center, we can see our flight orbiting, and a bit west, we can see friendly flights pushing into Redland territory. Mostly a collection of F-15s and F-A-18s. Mostly their job is to take out enemy fighters and the air defenses. We're going to let them get well ahead and do their work. So it's a little past 0440 now, and we've started our push. But we have a fair ways to go yet, and I'm going to take advantage of this quiet moment to look over my aircraft systems and make sure everything is in order. I confirm air-to-air missiles, GBU bombs, and countermeasures are all set to go, but I'm always listening for the AWACS.
Colt 1-1, Dark Star 1-1, Bra 256, for 120 at 19,000 knots.
That means there are fighters bearing 256 degrees, 120 nautical miles away. Now they are much too far away to represent any kind of real immediate threat. But let's go ahead and peek back at the tactical map and use this as another learning opportunity. We can see the enemy fighter way off on the lower left. He's not only no threat to us, but he literally has no chance of becoming a threat to us. He has a lot of good guys heading toward him. And if he has any kind of AWACS giving him awareness of what's heading his way, I'm sure he's wishing he was back on the ground now and probably back home sucking his thumb. Our guys are going to take care of him long before we have to give him a thought. In fact, the closest is less than 30 miles away. So in a moment, they're going to start lobbing AMRAAMs at him. Colt 1-1 pushing from waypoint 5 at 19 Angels.
Colt 1-1, Dark Star 1-1, Bra 260 for 110 at 21,000 knots. Colt 1-1, Dark Star 1-1, Bra 260 for 110 at 21,000 knots.
So our friendly AWACS was letting us know once again that there are enemy planes in the air and looking for something to do. He will not ordinarily let you know that there are friendlies in the area. Real AWACS probably. In DCS, no, the AI for AWACS is not yet that advanced. But we already know that. We know that our friendlies are going to take care of those fighters long before they become an issue for us, so we're going to continue with our push. That alarming screeching sound you're hearing is the RWR letting us know that those fighters are locking us up. If you look at the RWR monitor, which is on the upper part of the upper left panel, you can see that a MiG-29 pretty much off our 12 o'clock has locked us up. Now that panel doesn't show range, just bearing and if possible what the enemy is. And we already know from the intel provided by our friendly AWACS that he's too far away to be a threat, and there are plenty of friendlies between us and him to take care of the problem. Jumping back to the tactical map, we can see the blue icons of our friendlies and small round icons that represent missiles fired, showing that our friendlies are already engaging the minuscule enemy fighter force in the area. Looks like one enemy fighter against at least a dozen of our guys, and all but two headed in his direction, so he really doesn't have a chance.
2-1-1, Splash Bandit at Bullseye 133 for 15 at 30,000.
And there's the call that he's been taken down. Sounds like two of our fighters hit him. So swinging back to our side of the map, we can see where we are, and we'll just continue on our way.
Tusk 1, kill bunker at Bulls 163 for 18.
That call means one of our friendlies has hit his target, an enemy bunker, so things continue to look good for our flight. We are now heading towards steer point 10. It's time to make sure automatic steer point progression is turned off. As our flight is lining up on the final steer point, we can see there are enemy birds in the area. They suddenly put on their afterburners, which means they're maneuvering aggressively, and that's an almost definite indicator that they spotted something, potentially us. At this point, I'm going to keep my eyes on the right MFD. I have the Link 16 on, giving me telemetry from the other friendlies in the area, and they've spotted the bogies.
Colt 1-1, Dark Star 1-1, clean.
Interestingly, when I requested a picture from Dark Star, he reports nothing in the area, that it's safe. I double check.
Colt 1-1, Dark Star 1-1, clean.
He still says it's safe, there's nothing in the area. But the friendlies say otherwise. And the bandits are hot. They are moving in our direction. Whatever Dark Star sees, I'd say there's about a 100% chance they are out to get us. It's time to cut loose the wingmen. Engage bandits.
Tusk 1, kill armor at Bullseye 163 for 18. 2, engaging bandit.
I'm locked, but unless the bandit wants to waste a missile, sending a pitbull my way, I'm pretty sure he'll drop that lock soon and focus on my wingmen, so I'm going to stay mission focused.
41 at Bulls 099 for 11 at 20,000.
Nonetheless, I'll be paying attention for the missile launch warning. Looks like Two's decided to send him a welcoming gift. Whoa, that was a near miss on 2. I think the enemy missile must have detonated on his chaff. Whatever the case, 2's still going. It looks like the air-to-air threat has been put down, but I'm going to leave 3 and 4 to look out for more and call 2 back.
2, join up.
And with 2 on his way back, I'm going to call Dark Star once again and see if AWACS has an update on what's going on around me. Hopefully everything's clear, because we're almost to steer point 10, and we need to get set up for our attack run.
Dark Star, request picture.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Clean.
That's good news. It's time to come starboard, punch up to steer point 11, where our target is, recalling that our laser has been pre-programmed to sight in on steer point 11, so again double checking and making sure that automatic steer point progression is off, because we don't want our laser to point up to steer point 12 when we get close to 11, or we'll for sure miss.
Flight, join up.
And then I've called back the rest of my flight, since I don't seem to need the air-to-air protection anymore, and go ahead and switch to air-to-ground mode, but put the right MFD back to our HSD so we can see our map. Remember when I mentioned a little while back that when things get busy, they get really busy and everything starts happening really fast? Well, now's that time when everything gets busy and everything's happening really fast. That's why you need to check and double check and triple check and quadruple check all the way over here whenever you have a spare moment, because once it's time to start your bomb run or your air-to-air defense or your wild weasel or whatever the case may be, it's too late to be setting up things at that point. Everything needs to be smooth and ready to go when it's time. Alright, so there's still a few other things to do. Among others, I need to zoom in my left MFD. And it looks like there's some kind of SAM active to my 4 o'clock. It really shouldn't be a threat at this point. At least not according to our intel, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't keep my head on a swivel. But things get so busy at a time like this, it's easy to forget to do some things such as when to drop your bomb, and kind of embarrassed to admit it, but I got so busy managing my flight and getting everything else together that I overlooked the bomb drop indicator. Of course, in this particular situation, that's not that big a deal.
Keyboard. Show flight.
Ground threats and air fighters in the area have been suppressed, so I'll close up the kneeboard,
Keyboard.
overfly the target, then come back around and take him out on the next pass. As I said before, I'm only going to drop one GBU-10. It's a good-sized bomb on a target that isn't very much hardened, and all by itself it should be enough to take it out. I want to keep the other in reserve just in case I have to hit it again. Unlike that flat-face radar from our first mission, we aren't going to be able to back up our bombs with the F-16's guns this time. I don't think they're really big enough to do the job. So we really have to make the bombs count. Watching the time to steer point indicator on the lower right of the HUD, I'm going to wait till I'm about 1:15 out from the target, put on burners and come around hard, line straight up on the target, and this time we're going to drop that GBU-10 properly. I also at this time give a quick once over to the master arm switch and the laser arm switch. I want to make sure they are definitely both on. I'm sure we've all made the mistake of reaching our target and gone to deliver our ordnance, only then to realize we hadn't switched on our master arm or the laser, and in either case things didn't pan out so well. It's a mistake I try to avoid these days by double, triple, quadruple checking. Can't say it enough. Double, triple, quadruple check every time you have a moment. Alright, we're coming around. It's only 1:15 back to the target, which means just over a minute till we release the bombs. We can see our target clearly in the MFD, and that's important because if we can't see it, our laser can't paint it. But he's there, he's visible, and our laser can easily guide our bombs onto the target. Notice the little L below the target on the left MFD? It's solid, not blinking. That means our laser is armed. It's ready to go once I activate it. And if you've ever wondered why actual pilots don't keep the lasers armed the whole time they're on a laser-guided bomb mission, it's because these lasers are extremely powerful. You don't want to accidentally blind a friendly or some poor civilian on the ground. and there are sensors that can alert the enemy when they're being lased, so you don't really want to give them time to react either. Alright, we've dropped our bomb at about 13,480 feet with a speed of 387 knots. Those are good numbers. We're banking pretty hard left and decelerating, and we've activated our laser. I like to turn on the laser at about 15 seconds till impact, giving the bombs time to line up and little time for the enemy to react. Trigger to the first detente turns on the laser, and boom, that is a good hit.
Engage ground targets.
I'm going to retain my second bomb and swing around and make sure this target is properly destroyed, and at the same time, cut loose my wingman to destroy other ground targets. Flying with only one of these heavy bombs strapped to a wing is challenging. Not hugely difficult, but it does pull the F-16 heavily. Still, it's manageable, and as this is only a simulator, if the kill looks good, I'll toss it. And indeed, the kill looks good. There it is down there, and that's a big fire. And double checking my MFD, it looks like our target is not the only thing that's on fire. So I'd say we're good to head back.
Dark Star, request picture.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Clean.
Flight, return to base.
Dark Star reports the skies are clean, and our flight has dropped their ordnance, so I'm sending them immediately back to base because they are also probably low on fuel. DCS's AI does not encourage your wingman to conserve fuel. When it comes to fuel, I'm also not doing too great, so I'm going to climb up to Bladeland somewhere between 20 and 25 Angels, get my speed to on or about 400 knots, and bypass several steer points to take a shortcut home. To conserve fuel and also to make the F-16 more pleasant to fly, I also dropped that extra GBU, something I'm certain wouldn't be done in real life. But without it, it's nice that the plane isn't pulling hard to one side anymore. Just when I decided to make sure the route was clear, the AI decided to report my success.
Okie doke.
Dark Star, Colt 1, in-flight report. Target destroyed.
1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Bra 309 460.
Colt 1, Dark Star, copy. You're cleared RTB.
So the target was destroyed, and once again we'll check bogey dope.
Okie doke.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Bra 310 460 at 17,000. Cold.
If you've ever wondered what the difference is between requesting picture and bogey dope, well, bogey dope is simple to explain. It is the bearing, range, and altitude of an aircraft relative to you. It's very easy to follow. It's especially handy when you have enemies engaging. Requesting picture tells you if there are enemies in the air, and their bearing, range, and altitude from a point designated on the map and known as the bullseye. We'll go more into bullseyes in another episode. Alright, the flight back home turned out to be very much standard operating procedure, so I jumped through it. We're now at the second to last steer points and preparing to land.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Bra 318 490 at 20,000. Cold.
Colt 1, Dark Star, push NATSIF, UHF Channel 4.
Dark Star's reported an enemy contact, but it's a long way away and moving away from us. It's no concern. But we'll just double check on the radar lock.
Okie doke.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Bra 320 4100 at 12,000. Cold.
That contact is 100 miles away and going cold, moving away from us. No threat.
Colt 1-1. Dark Star 1-1. Pop-up group 319 4100 at 11,000. Cold.
It's time to call home and let them know that we're inbound and ready for dinner.
Inbound.
Colt 1-1. Fly heading 07643. QFE 28.18. Runway 21 to pattern altitude.
Alright, I have my ILS and TACAN on, you can hear the radios. And that's the racetrack just up ahead. It serves as a handy landmark. As we pass it, we should turn onto heading 220, extend our air brakes, and lower our undercarriage, in final preparations to land. Now this is a night landing, but honestly, night landings are no different than day landings.
Altitude.
I don't want bitchin' Betty bothering me all the way down though, so I'm going to go ahead and shut her up. The last thing you want when you're really busy is another distraction.
Code 1-1. Cleared for visual. Contact tower.
Request landing.
Code 1-1. Cleared to land. Runway 21. Wind 050 at 2 meters per second.
When you get the call to contact tower, that's when you can request the landing, which I did there. And in the F-16, you should have your flap switch in the automatic position. The flight computer will take care of lowering your flaps automatically for you. At this point, landing is a balancing act. Have your brakes extended and your gears down, and descend, but not so fast you run into the ground. I find I like to keep my speed between about 180 and 220 until just before the runway. I do have to fight the habit of coming into the runway really steep, which is a habit I developed flying the F-18, because steep landings are pretty standard for F-18s coming down on aircraft carriers, where you have an area to land about the size of a postage stamp, so to speak. And your landing comes to a very abrupt halt as a hook on your airplane is caught by an arrestor cable, which brings you to an almost immediate stop. And by comparison, we have lots of room and to spare here. There's a bit of a crosswind, so I have to crab walk my way back onto the runway, but it looks like we're going to pull this off just fine. As our speed gets below 180 and we get closer to the ground, the flaps will extend more so that we can bring up our nose more, and that's ideal. And we'll aim to take our time coming down on the runway, being nice and patient, no reason to rush, lots of room in front of us. And once we touch down, we'll gently nose down, and then gently apply brakes until the brakes are pretty much mostly down, and bleed off the last of our speed. You might notice the F-16 is a bit of a twitchy bird on the ground, much more so than other aircraft I've flown, such as the A-10C and the F-A-18, and you'll have to make lots of small corrections once she touches down. Once your speed gets below 70 to 90 knots, put your nose wheel steering back on, otherwise you won't have much control of the aircraft. And if you have rudder pedals, remember to rely on those pedals to steer. By and large, once you're on the ground, you can take your hand off the stick. Of course, that's not the case if you're using a stick with a twist axis for rudder pedals. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of Red Flag Mission 3 for the F-16 Viper. Thanks for coming along, and if you like what you see, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the Cerulean Skies channel. It really helps.